Hello and welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jenn.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of the Note Doctors. Today we are honored to have Dr. Leigh VanHandel. Jenn, can you tell us a little bit more about Leigh?
Absolutely. I'm going to read for you the bio that Leigh sent us. Leigh VanHandel is an associate professor of music theory at the University of British Columbia. Prior to UBC, she taught at Michigan State University for 15 years. Her primary research areas are music cognition, music theory pedagogy, the relationship between music and language, computer-assisted research, and how those things all relate to one another. She's done stuff and published things, most recently as editor and contributor to the Routledge Companion to Music Theory Pedagogy, published in 2020. We have a great time talking with Leigh. You're going to love this conversation, so tune in now.
I basically just realized that we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about the fact that a lot of people have the exact same feelings, I don't really know what I'm doing. They're going to find out I'm a fraud. I get nervous walking into every single class, especially on the first day, because I don't know what's facing me, and I don't know if I'm going to have that student who stands up in the back and finally says, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a fraud. And, so just shining a light on that, basically.
So today our very special guest is Dr. Leigh VanHandel. So we're so pleased to have you on our podcast for today. And we always like to ask our guests, what was it that got you started into music theory? What got you into that? Was it an early childhood fascination with tweed or jackets with patches on it? What was it? Was it something other than that, perhaps?
Yeah, it's actually a sort of interesting story. I loved music, obviously, and when I went to college, I actually started off in genetic engineering and realized that I missed music way too much, and so I switched into music halfway through the year. And this was at Ohio State. I didn't know what you could do in music. I thought it was just performance or music education. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, I don't really want to perform, so I guess I'll do music ed. And I also had it in my head, I don't really want to teach elementary school because my mom was an elementary school teacher. And so I was like, okay, maybe I can do high school, and I don't really want to do marching band, but I guess I'll have to. And
I relate to all of that.
Yep, me too.
I mean, bless the people who do it. That's,
yes.
Having gone through that degree program, that's what I can say. So I went into music ed, and then midway through, I think my third year, I had a really bad field teaching experience. And I went to go talk to my advisor, and it turned out my advisor was on leave. And I had been reassigned to this woman who I'd never met before, whose name was Anne Blombach. And so I went into Anne's office, and I was crying, and literally crying. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do music ed. I'm a junior now. What do I do? And she sort of looks at me and she goes, your name actually came up in the theory area meetings the other day because you're taking advanced theory courses and graduate courses in theory. Why?
Why would you do such a thing to yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, well, they sounded like fun. And she sort of leans back and looks at me and she goes, well, it's possible to do music theory instead of music ed. And I was like, wait, you can be a music theory major? And she's, yes, you can. And I was like, what would I do with that?
Logical question.
Very practical.
And she just, once again, she sort of looks at me and goes, how do you think I got here? And I'm like, wait, I could teach like at the college level and I could teach like theory stuff. That sounds really cool. How do I do that? So I've told Anne this story, and we've talked about it many times. Anne Blombach is the reason I'm a music theorist, basically. That's how it started. Anne, of course, is the woman who was behind McGammett for years and years and years and years. And so I worked with her for a couple years at Ohio State, and I learned programming with her, and I learned like the basics of pedagogy with her. So really, she is the reason I'm who I am, I think. And, so I was really, really fortunate to be able to work with her. And then it took, I was like, this is fun. I'm going to keep doing this. And so, Stony Brook for my master's degree. And I was really, really fortunate that, Bob Yertigan was at Stony Brook the years I was there. This was right before he went to Northwestern. And then I ended up at Stanford for my PhD, which is a little bit of an unusual choice. There was a boy involved. We were trying to get in the same location, and the degree took, the boy didn't. That all is fine. But, again, I got really lucky at Stanford because while I was at Stanford, David Huron was there as a visiting scholar. And so I got to work with him, and I was able to go take classes in linguistics and art history and all kinds of things, and of course Stanford has amazing people in every discipline. So I got to sort of explore a lot of things. And that it worked. It's not a path I would recommend to anyone else, honestly, because Stanford isn't known for their theory program. But I was really lucky that I was able to make it work. And and then I was really lucky that people were willing to take a chance on hiring me out of a program that technically wasn't a theory program. So and here we are. I don't know.
Seems like you've made some good choices.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a lot of luck involved, I think, though. I mean, I didn't really know about music cognition, even though I was at Ohio State, which was one of the birthplaces of music cognition, and had David Butler there, and and I found out about it later, and I was like, oh, why didn't I take advantage of that? And then I went to Stony Brook, and Yertigan happened to be there, and Stanford and Huron happened to be there, so I got really lucky along the way, and I also got a lot of support from wonderful people who helped me get where I got. So.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people, when you hear their story, they almost always talk about certain mentors that really helped them along the way. It's rare that somebody has, kind of done it, quote unquote, on their own. I mean, that really doesn't exist. You have mentors that are really crucial to your development in almost every case. So that's really cool.
And, I mean, those people aren't the only ones. I got to work with Judy Lockhead when I was at Stony Brook, and I'm going to forget people, and I'm going to feel bad if I don't mention every single person I've worked with. So I'm going to stop there. But, I've been really fortunate.
Yeah. Well, speaking of mentoring, I think a really neat thing that we found kind of doing research and things prepping for this interview was your Ask Dr. Van blog, where you ask, you're kind of like an advice columnist for theory, right? But middle school or high school students email you with they're doing kind of research projects, and they find you and you respond on your website. And so can you talk a little bit about how that even happens and about kind of the things you talk about or write about?
Yeah, I started getting emails from students, middle school, high school, whatever, who were doing research projects on something about music. And they started emailing me these questions. And even though I said I didn't want to teach that age, I still, am sympathetic to people who are who are that age. And so I would answer the questions, and it kind of started because one day, like, I answered a question for someone, and then like 3 days later, I got the same question from someone else. And I was sort of like, not complaining, but I was sort of like, oh my God, I wish I could just post these and then they would be available for people to look at, so I wouldn't have to like, rewrite the whole thing. And of course I don't have to rewrite it. I could copy paste, but, but my husband was like, well, why don't you? And I was like, oh, oh, wait, yeah. And, this was this was when SMT started talking about like outreach and engagement. And this was a big thing for the Society for Music Perception and Cognition at the time also. And so I was like, wait, this is like technically outreach and engagement because, people can find this and can get questions answered or can email me and ask things. So I started the blog, and I get questions every so often. I haven't updated it recently because I haven't gotten any questions, but it's kind of fun too, because sometimes it turns into a conversation with the students. And like I'll respond and I'll give them some information, and then they'll go, oh wait, no, tell me more about this, and it sort of turns into a fun thing. And I don't know, I enjoy doing it.
Do you have kind of a favorite question that has come up that you've answered on the blog?
I sort of like the one about why Stairway to Heaven is the best song ever.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
And of course, and that one was kind of funny because you sort of have to figure out, how do I be diplomatic about this, and how do I,
oh yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so Stairway to Heaven is the best song ever is not exactly a thesis. Like, let's unpack this a little bit.
That's great.
So I think I ended up talking about like generic stuff like tension and resolution and dissonance and consonance, and talking about, like, giving some examples in that song of places where those things happen and how those things are interesting to us when we're listening to it. But I hope that student did not come away from that conversation thinking that I was justifying the thesis. Because I was really trying to say, this is how music works, and a lot of music has these things. So,
yeah, that's great. So, in the middle of this absolutely insane year that was 2020 and seems to be continuing into 2021, you actually started a totally new job. So, can you tell us about that? And are you teaching online, face-to-face, all of those things?
Yeah. I never go halfway with anything. If I'm going to do something ridiculous, I am going to go full ridiculous, and I'm going to make an international move during a pandemic is what's going to happen. So I'd been at Michigan State for 15 years. This job came available at UBC, and I couldn't pass up the opportunity, so applied, interviewed, got the job, and of course by the time I got the job we were shut down and in the pandemic, so I wasn't actually sure we were going to be able to make it. Like, there was no guarantee that we were going to be allowed to cross the border, any of that stuff.
Right.
So we got really fortunate. Everything about, like, every physical thing about the move went as well as it possibly could have. And we got here and got settled. UBC is entirely online, so teaching online. I suspect it's like a lot of universities where things like ensembles are meeting in, like, small ensembles are meeting in person or things like that, but academic classes are meeting online. So I will say that my new colleagues are absolutely wonderful, but I haven't met most of them like in person. I'm in my apartment and I walk from the bedroom to the room that is my office, and I teach from there, and then I walk out into the living room and I'm home again. And it's a little isolating, just because I miss the hallway conversations. I miss meeting my new colleagues. The hallway conversations are sort of where you figure out where the bodies are buried, and how things and how
So
things
true.
really work. And so I miss that interaction. But that being said, everyone has been fantastic. Everyone's been really welcoming. It's also weird that I've been teaching an entire cohort of students that I've never met.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know like what level to expect, or like where to pitch a graduate class or where to pitch to undergraduates. It was sort of, there was a lot of flying blind in there, and it was weird, but I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving UBC. I'm loving Vancouver. It's been a really good move overall. It's just, I wouldn't recommend an international move during a pandemic to anyone. It was a little stressful.
I would imagine so, yeah.
Definitely. Well, I think one of the other things you did this year was present an SMT talk on the subject of imposter syndrome, and I was really intrigued by that as well. If you could, I know some of our listeners surely were at the talk, and I think we all three were at the talk as well, but if you could just give us a little bit of a summary of what you talked about and kind of how that's impacted what you do in your teaching.
Oh, jeepers. I gave the talk initially at Michigan State because I was asked to present at a sort of a Women in Music seminar series at the College of Music there, and I've recently realized that there's a lot of things that we don't talk about. We don't talk about things like imposter syndrome. We don't talk about mental health. We don't talk about, as a grad student, you're just expected to keep paddling under the surface, but look really calm as you're going, along. And so I realized that having someone talk about imposter syndrome, because once you get people talking about it, everyone goes, oh my God, I felt like that. Yeah. And I felt like it was really important, so I gave the talk there, and then I had mentioned it to some people at SMT, and then I was invited to do it again at I think it was an informatics session. I have no idea why it was on an informatics session, but there you go. So I basically just realized that we need to talk about these things. We need to talk about the fact that a lot of people have the exact same feelings, I don't really know what I'm doing. They're going to find out I'm a fraud. I get nervous walking into every single class, especially on the first day, because I don't know what's facing me, and I don't know if I'm going to have that student who stands up in the back and finally says, you don't know what you're talking about. You're a fraud. And, and so just shining a light on that, basically. And, so I had so many people come up to me afterwards and either say, I'm so glad to hear somebody talk about this. I had people emailing me saying, I didn't know there was a word. I didn't know there was a thing, that this was a thing that other people felt. I thought it was just me. And, knowing that other people have those same thoughts and feelings helps in some way, I think. I remember finding out, I won't mention names, but a very prominent theorist, those all are capital letters, one time confided in me that they felt the same way. And I was like, what, no, you're not, you're not a fraud. There's no way you're a fraud. Right. I'm the fraud. what are you talking about? And, but honestly, hearing somebody that I look up to, that I respect, say that made me go, oh, okay, wait, this is a little more normal than I make it out to be, I think. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's an important thing to talk about.
I agree.
I think so too. Yeah. I remember it was my first semester of my master's in music theory, which was at University of North Texas. And we were all encouraged to join the Graduate Association for Musicologists and Theorists. And so I went to that very first meeting, and it was like a meet and greet with coffee or something kind of meeting, and we were all standing around drinking our coffee, and someone came up to me and asked me what my opinion was about late Beethoven string quartet harmony. And I was like,
it's pretty.
At this point I'm
weird initiation.
Right,
yeah.
I was like 22 years old.
Right.
Fresh out of undergrad. And I have no idea what I actually said in response to that. But what I do remember is that I got in the car, and on the drive home, I called my undergraduate mentor / music theory professor and said, what did I get myself into? I'm never going to be able to do this. What on earth were they even talking to me about? I think it's important for everyone to know, like at various stages, including the one I'm in right now, there's things I don't know.
Yeah.
There's just stuff that isn't my specialty. And then there are things that that I do very well. And that's true for everyone. And we all have moments of feeling like, how on earth did I get here, and who entrusted me with this job that I have?
I had such a similar experience. I was like my first seminar at Stony Brook, like the first meeting of it, we had gotten a reading assignment like beforehand, which was, read the first 3 books of Boethius or something.
Oh my gosh. In the original Latin, please.
Right. Well, I'm getting there. So
we didn't have Tom Christensen on speed dial.
So this was a graduate class with both master's and doctoral students from musicology and music theory in it. And there was a very, very senior musicology person in this class who, as we started talking about it, comes out and goes, well, I went back and I looked at the original Latin for this passage because I was wondering, and starts expounding upon the nuances of translating the actual Latin. And I was like, I'm dead. What is even happening here? I was like, is this what's expected of me? Oh my God. It was the exact same feeling though. It was, it was the do I belong? It was, is this actually for me? Mm-hmm. And, I feel like we need to remind people that yes, it is for you.
Yeah.
And
maybe we give newcomers like a softer landing than late Beethoven or reading original Latin.
Yeah. I mean, can we maybe not gatekeep quite as hard, please?
Right.
Is I think the takeaway from that.
Yeah.
Now my question is, how do you acknowledge that kind of imposter syndrome that you have as an individual to your students? Because our students have that same feeling, right? Mm-hmm. They had this feeling like, I'm not going to be good enough, or they might feel like I can't let on how I'm struggling to my peers or to my professors. The professors know exactly how you're doing. It's not a mystery to us at all.
Yeah.
And we also have, as theory instructors, this kind of gatekeeper mentality. Like theory is the gatekeeper for students to get into, advanced theory or just, advancing into their whatever degree it is. So how can you relate that own imposter syndrome that you feel to your students, and how does that maybe empower them if you can be kind of vulnerable enough to do that?
I think that's the key. I think you have to make yourself vulnerable. And, I've made it my mission to do that, to talk about things like that. I think it's easier with grad students. I think it's easier to say to a graduate student, I understand why you're having problems writing this document, or let me tell you about the struggles that I've had with procrastination, or whatever. And or if a student comes in and says, well, I'm supposed to be giving this presentation, but I'm really scared because I don't think I know anything, it's like, okay, let's have this conversation. So I think it's really important to not just talk about things in the abstract and say, well, some people find that they feel this way. It's much more powerful if you can say, here's how I feel, and here's, the mental pickup that I try to give myself in order to get past it. And I think I've been teaching freshmen in the undergraduate curriculum for a long time, and the freshmen end up having some of the same feelings, especially the "Am I supposed to be here?" And when that comes out, it's usually like week 7 or 8 of fall semester of their first semester, and maybe they haven't been doing all the work they've been supposed to do, and suddenly things are piling up, and they have exams, and maybe they're not doing as well in their lessons, and they're having, they're struggling with things. And you can sort of see that deer in the headlights kind of, is college for me? Am I supposed to be here? And I really tried to reach out to students who I saw were experiencing that, or who I felt might be. And, the same thing, like, what is it that's not working for you? How can, let's brainstorm ways of fixing this. Just trying to show them that somebody recognizes what they're thinking, and that it's okay that they're thinking that, and that just because they're thinking it doesn't mean it's true. Yeah. So I think it is really important to reach out and to talk to people about things like that.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Totally.
Yeah. So 2020 was actually a really big year for you, because you also edited and were a contributor to the Routledge Companion to Music Theory Pedagogy. So can you tell us about that project, and maybe, what it's like to be an editor on a project like that, which is a huge text, a huge volume. So first of all, thank you for that contribution.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Secondly, can you talk about that project?
Yeah. So I'd been talking with Routledge about doing some kind of a pedagogy book, and I wanted to do it because it's something I feel very strongly about, but I was also sort of really reluctant to put another, like, Norton Guide to Music Theory Pedagogy, because I forget what the official name of it is. It's behind me on the on my bookshelf. But
Teaching Music Theory. Right?
Teaching Music Theory. Thank you. Because they did such an amazing job with that volume. I was, that's an incredible volume, and I wanted to do something different. And so it was literally a shower thought. It was one of those things where, you're sort of in the shower and going, hey, what if I did this? And, so I proposed this idea of, like, lesson plans that can immediately be put into practice. And I proposed that to the editor at Routledge, and she was really skeptical at first. And especially when I started talking about, we'll have like 65 of them. She was like, what? But I managed to convince her to let me try. And I put out like a general call. And the call was basically, think about the lesson that you look forward to teaching. Think about the lesson that you're proudest of, that the students remember and talk about, afterwards, and that, sort of reaches the students and impacts the way that they think. Write that lesson up, send it to me. And so I asked for proposals, just like the topic and a general idea of what you do. And honestly, I didn't know what I was going to get. I kind of thought maybe I'll get like 50 or 60, and, maybe I'll be able to pick like 50 that are worth putting in the book. I got over 200 proposals.
Wow.
And, and so then it became like balancing topics and balancing approaches and balancing, form versus oral skills versus chromatic harmony versus, fundamentals, and like trying to make sure that that different topics were represented, but also it was a very conscious thought to make sure that there was a good gender balance in the book, that in authors and in repertory, that there was a balance of like institutions that people came from, because teaching at a community college is different than teaching at a state school, is different than teaching at a liberal arts university. It's so I wanted to make sure that that as many sort of perspectives as possible were represented. And the book ended up with about 70 chapters, and I had to herd a lot of cats. I'll say that. But in general, everyone that contributed did a phenomenal job. And it was a lot of herding cats, but most of the cats were pretty well behaved. And because with that many authors, if one person isn't doing something, it holds everything up, and so I was really fortunate that the folks who had proposed things really wanted to write the chapters. They were short, so it didn't take them a lot of time. They were willing to hear like feedback and, would you be willing to change this example for something else? And so it was an incredible amount of work. But it was also so rewarding to work with my colleagues in that way, and also to work with some grad students. There's grad students who have lesson plans in there, and so it was so amazing to work with those folks, and I'm really proud of it, and there's the book, there's the website, there's the materials that everyone put together, and people made their handouts and assignments and, all kinds of materials available for people to use. And I really hope people take advantage of it. I enjoyed doing it. I learned a lot. I like when I learn things.
Yeah, we'll have to include some of the information about that at the end, if possible, so that people can definitely check it out. And even some of the teachers, like, for example, Akira Sato, who we just interviewed, some of the high school AP theory teachers, I'm sure they would be interested in some of those materials. I mean, what a gold mine of information and resources and handouts and lessons and all that kind of stuff. It's great.
It's tremendous. I mean, it covers everything from fundamentals through 20th century through, it's pretty amazing. It's a great resource.
There's a few sort of more speculative articles like about curriculum design and that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's, here's a topic, here's the lesson, here's what you can do in 1, 2, 3 classes to teach this material.
Is there a particular lesson that you have implemented into your own teaching?
Oh boy. So here's the dirty little secret. I've used almost all of them.
So this was just a ploy. So you wouldn't have to write lesson plans for a whole year.
Exactly. No, that's what I joked about at the beginning, was like, this way I have all these lesson plans and I'm done, So yeah, no, honestly, I have used many of the lesson plans. One of them, I will admit, I used straight from the proposal. Like, I got the proposal and it was detailed enough that I was like, I'm actually teaching that topic tomorrow.
Here we go.
That is already on my schedule for tomorrow. I am teaching that topic. I'm going to see if this works. And it worked brilliantly. And I was like, this is a must have in the book because it was fantastic. Yeah, no, it was, I've used a bunch of things, and, even the things that I haven't used have taught me something about just classroom management, or how different people think about introducing material, reinforcing material, working with things. So everything has had some kind of an effect on the way I think and teach.
I think that's so great, because my wife is a middle school choir director, and she's an educator, and she just doesn't understand how you can be a college professor and have maybe taken one class on pedagogy, and music theory is one of the worst, right? If you're lucky, maybe two, and it's this same kind of thing where it goes back to this imposter syndrome, where you're just expected to be able to teach, these courses, and I never learned how to make a lesson plan in college. I never learned, any of that stuff. It was all just, the material and you just say it. So this is so. Which is the worst thing that you can do.
It turns out that doesn't work that well.
It doesn't work very well. Yeah. So I think that's wonderful, and I think that needs to happen more.
Yeah, no, it's we don't get prepared. That's one of the things that I was really proud about at Michigan State, was that we had a year-long music theory pedagogy class. And so our students came out really prepared. They had engaged with the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning Literature. They had had a whole bunch of teaching experiences in the class, and or in their teaching for the undergraduate curriculum. And we, it is a process. You have to learn how to pace a class. You have to learn how to introduce material. And so you can't just walk in and teach like you were taught. And I think that, unfortunately, that's a model that has been used. And I'm really happy to contribute to getting us away from that model to actually thinking about how we're teaching and what we're doing. So that was, that's the nefarious goal, right? Is for someone to pick up the book and go, there isn't a single chapter in here that talks about lecturing.
Yes.
Where's the sage on the stage chapter?
Right. Exactly. And of course, the sage on the stage isn't likely to pick up a book on pedagogy, unfortunately, but maybe if it hits them on the head, and falls open to a chapter, they might peruse it. So that was the goal. If a couple people learn how to pace a class, how to, present material, how to, engage students in their own learning process, then it was all worth it.
Absolutely. I had the absolute privilege of having a chat on the phone the other day with Jenny Snodgrass. That's always a privilege. And she said at one point in that conversation that she was like, I feel like pedagogy is getting its day. It's like people are starting to talk about it. It's becoming a more regularly included part of our scholarship, of our research, of what we do. And I really thought about the last maybe 10, 15 years, I've seen such a change. When I was preparing to write my dissertation, I had two different mentors. I debated writing on a pedagogy topic and maybe partnering with some music ed colleagues to do some research in that area. And I had two different mentors tell me, don't do it. You'll have a hard time getting a job. Yep. You need to write either an analysis dissertation or a history of theory dissertation, which is what I ultimately did. And I don't necessarily regret that choice, but it does make me sad that at that time, they said in many ways for two reasons. First of all, it's not taken as seriously. And secondly, as a woman, you can't take that risk. And the thing is that, I think that actually was unfortunately really good advice. And I'm so glad that might be changing now. It's great,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Again, I don't want to out anybody without their consent, but a well-known female scholar once told me that she had the same advice given to her. That, you know, this is someone who's a little bit more senior than I am. That she had the same advice given to her, that she should not write on pedagogy because she wouldn't be taken seriously. And she made the same decision and wrote on something else. And I think that that's really, really unfortunate.
It is.
Yep.
But it does make me happy that pedagogy is being taken more seriously. You know, the pedagogy interest group at the SMT conference, the virtual SMT conference, had something like 125 people come to the interest group meeting, which was amazing. And, you know, there were like 3 other sessions on pedagogy on the conference that, you know, we didn't sponsor, that that grew spontaneously. So, so I feel like pedagogy is, like you said, being taken more seriously. I love seeing that. And, you know, let me put in a little plug. If anyone wants to come to work with me at UBC on a pedagogy-oriented topic, I will support that, you know, and I will let you write the dissertation you want to write.
That's great. That's great to hear. Hopefully that finds some listeners that are intrigued. I'm sure there are people out there that are listening that are thinking about that right now in this moment.
Yeah.
You know, half of what we do is teaching.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know,
At least. Yeah.
Over half.
Yeah, exactly. At least half. And, you know, and it's also, when you listen to kids in the core curriculum complain about theory, it's because they're not seeing the relevance. It's because they're not seeing how things relate to each other. That's all pedagogy. We can change the discipline and change how the discipline is perceived by being effective communicators. And that's just pedagogy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the pedagogy topic I kind of want to hit on, because I know I've heard you talk about it, is cognition, specifically working memory and all that, because that's another area like sightseeing and dictation where usually you don't learn about working memory and how your mind works and how you chunk things. It's, you just play the melody and you try to give some tips and you get it or you don't, right? There's all this research being done in neuroscience and all these things. And of course, it's separated from theory in many ways. It's kind of hard for us to get into it. But you've done some really great work in bringing those concepts and just understanding how the mind works and the central executive and all these things. And could you just give us just a little bit of kind of how that works and why that's helpful for us as oral skills teachers?
And it's not just oral skills, it's, you know, written theory also. I mean, so basically the sort of pop science explanation, somebody who understands this is going to listen and be like, oh God. But, you know, the way I think about it is that there's basically like a little dude in your brain who's in charge of allocating resources, right? And so he's the executive control. And so information comes in and the executive control decides, is this important information? If so, what do I do with it? And so, you know, the way things can go wrong with that is if there's too much information coming in, the executive control is just like throwing things everywhere and it can't figure out where the information needs to go, right? Or if it, you know, short circuits and goes, this is not an important piece of information, and throws it away and then focuses on something that isn't important but sort of obsesses over it. And so where this comes into play, you know, for something like oral skills or something like music fundamentals, where it's almost, especially fundamentals, it's almost like algorithmic. There's processes you can follow to spell an interval. There's processes you can follow to spell a chord. If your executive control short circuits at exactly the wrong moment, you've lost all the progress that you've made in trying to achieve whatever that goal is. And the same thing is true for oral skills, where if you're paying attention to the wrong thing as you're singing or as you're taking a dictation or something like that, you're not able to sort of see the whole picture because you're obsessing about the wrong thing. You're thinking about the wrong thing. So being aware of like how we process information, what can go wrong while we're processing information, and what we can do about it, I think is really, really important. And one of the things that I've realized is that that working memory deficits can be really, really, really problematic for, especially at the beginning level of, learning fundamentals, learning like beginning oral skills, because the cognitive load of what they're learning is so high. Exactly. It's so high. And if I ask you to spell a major third above D, you go, boom, F sharp, right? There's not did I get that right? Yes. Okay.
You can always edit it out. So
okay. There isn't a process. We don't have to go through a process. And I think that we forget that students for whom this is new information have to go, okay, D. All right, where's D on the staff? Okay, that's what D looks like. All right, key signature for D is, okay, circle of fifths, and there's like all of these steps that they have to go through. And so that means that the cognitive load of asking someone a major third above D is huge when it's brand new information. And so thinking about ways to acknowledge this, to work with it, to recognize when students are having problems with that, and to try to, sort of identify and offer solutions. That's been something that I've been really focusing on. It's so my pet theory that I haven't proven yet, but I'm going to, is that students who have working memory difficulties are especially disadvantaged in sort of core curriculum theory courses, simply because the processing power is a little bit diminished and they have to work a little bit harder. What I'm planning on doing one of these days is taking an incoming class of freshmen, giving them a working memory battery of tests and just testing their working memory, and then putting that away and not looking at it, and teaching the classes, but taking very careful notes about what students struggle with, who's struggling with it, and sort of looking for information about, okay, so this student was struggling with interval inversions and this student was struggling with chord inversions. And then going back after everything is done and trying to correlate that to where they had issues with working memory.
That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
I would be so interested to see how that turns out.
Because there's different types of working memory too. There's like the phonological loop, which remembers, words and language. But I think my theory is that students who have trouble with what's called the visuospatial sketchpad, the process. They're going to run into problems with notation, with chord inversion, with interval inversion, with things that involve like rotations, possibly with 20th century, and so this is something that I strongly believe is true. And one of these days I'm going to get to do the study that proves it.
That's awesome. Well, if you need some other like Theory 1 classes,
yeah, sign us up. I'm in.
Absolutely.
The largest one in the country.
I may be tapping you because this is,
Yeah,
more
Ben's
data
got like 240 kids in his room, so
Yeah.
yeah, you'd have tons of data right there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know. I'm open to collaborate, especially on something that it sounds like will really move this subdiscipline forward. I mean, I really relate to that visual spatial part that you were just talking about. I was talking to a student today. I've only done one-on-one office hours, but I was talking about how I always prefer to hear something first and then look at it later. And I was talking about that because this student was the opposite. And I said, you probably prefer to look at something first and then hear it later. And I said, well, there are so many different ways of processing this particular musical passage. Like for me, I would like to hear it first and I would understand it better first that way. And it was like, whoa, mind equals blown kind of moment, you know. I was like, yeah, there's so many different ways that people could possibly understand this, you know. But yeah, I've always been very weak on my visual spatial. It took me like 5 years to actually be able to navigate just the music building at North Texas. So.
It is a confusing building. I'll give you some credit.
Well, we unfortunately are coming to the end of our time. This has just been such a blast. We've hit on so many wonderful topics. But we'd like to finish up with just some rapid fire questions. All right.
This is the part I'm dreading. Just so you know, this is the part I'm dreading. I'm not good under pressure.
We need to have people rapid fire us sometime. Huh? We can change it up.
All right. So Ben, Jen, do you know what you're going to ask?
I'm ready.
All right, Jen, why don't you go first? Okay.
All right. So the next time you teach Music Theory 1, what is one thing you're going to do differently?
Less music by dead white German males.
I love it. Me too.
Yeah.
That's on my list as well.
Yep. Totally.
You know, you can teach notation, you can teach a lot of different things using any repertory, and you know, and not just tonal music either. You can include 20th century, you can include post-tonal, 21st century. If you expand their idea of the repertory that early, it becomes easier for them, I feel like, as they move through, you know, when they get to a post-tonal class or something like that, because they've experienced it already in a, you know, in as they've gone. So yeah, that's the thing that I'm going to do.
That's great.
Totally. Okay, my question is, now having looked at over 200 lesson plans, plus all of your previous lesson plans and conversations with other people at SMTs and interest group meetings, etc., best lesson to teach from Leigh VanHandel?
Like topic or?
Favorite topic. Yeah, let's go favorite topic to teach.
Oh, God. Oh, boy. Okay, I'm a big fan of wacky modulations.
Ooh, yeah. Okay.
You know, so the problem is that they appear so rarely that it's almost not worth doing it. Except that I love the topic. So you know, common tone modulations or enharmonic reinterpretations of German augmented sixth chords, or you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And sort of, you know, I kind of love the experience of playing something for students and having it take that left turn and just seeing their reactions where they kind of go, what just happened? You know, like their eyes get really big and they kind of, and I feel like that makes them curious about how it works. And that's kind of a payoff for all of the stuff that they've had to do.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, so maybe that I could probably list 20 other things. So
That's great. All right, and so mine is just real quick, but perhaps most controversial: 564 or 164.
Oh Lord, you're really gonna make me take a stand. No, I'm a 564 person. But it's interesting because I was a Casca Payne baby. I learned theory from Casca Payne. And so I was a 164 person. And when I first learned about the cadential 64, you know, 564-53 thing, I was like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then it clicked and I went, oh my God, the other thing doesn't make any sense. So yeah, so I think I'm a function over spelling person.
Very good, very good. Well, as we're finishing up, maybe just kind of close us out by just letting us know kind of what, a little bit maybe about the Routledge Companion to Music Theory Pedagogy, kind of maybe kind of where we can learn more about that, and maybe some other projects you have working on, and then also just where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're up to.
Okay, so the Routledge Companion to Music Theory Pedagogy, obviously you can buy it on Amazon or through the Routledge website. There's a website which is actually available at, let me get this right, rctmtp.com. Routledge Companion to Music Theory Pedagogy. I'm very clever. And that is where all the links to all of the supplemental materials are for the book. And I really, really hope that people know that that exists, because it's an amazing set of resources that go along with every amazing lesson plan that's in the book. So that's available there. And if anyone is interested in contacting me, my email address is leigh.vanhandel@ubc.ca. And anyone is welcome to reach out to me and ask questions. It may even end up on the Ask Dr. Van blog.
So that's our show. Thank you so much for listening to Note Doctors, the Music Theory and Pedagogy podcast. We will be back with more interviews with professors and teachers who will be dropping all sorts of theory knowledge for your education, edification, and enjoyment. So until then, bye-bye.